The anchors of every elite defense usually fall on the biggest guy on the floor, the center, who's expected to hold down the paint and protect the rim. And although schemes have changed over the years, the one thing that stayed consistent for a long time is the big on the floor always check the other big. But recently, NBA teams have discovered a new way to implement the center defensively, and that way is roaming. Often a matchup-dependent tactic, roaming changes the way defenses approach opposite lineups, even if that means a size difference in the front court. This strategy was used for special occasions in the past, but now it's seen night in and night out. But what makes this simple change so effective, and how do different teams and players use it in their own unique way? Now technically, every center plays around the rim, but the actual term roaming is to extensively and intentionally help off your primary matchup as a big to have more freedom to move around the court. And in this video, I'm not saying that roaming is some brand new concept never seen in the NBA, because there have been plenty of scenarios of older matchups where the center played off of their man to have more freedom at the rim. Before the NBA implemented the defensive 3 seconds rule in 2001, teams were able to camp centers in the paint with no repercussions. But after that rule came into effect, we saw this strategy less and less. But there were times when it popped up, like the 2014 Eastern Conference Finals, when David West guarded Heat center Chris Bosh, with Roy Hibbert's primary matchup being Udonis Haslem, so he could be at the rim more and help off of the non-shooter in Haslem. Dwight Howard also used to excel in this role with his crazy athleticism, specifically next to other bigs. But in today's game, teams are using it in a different way. The norm back then was centers always guarded the other center. Teams would match up directly with the same positions, leaving smaller guys to help off with non-shooters. But now, teams are throwing centers on perimeter players, specifically ones who can't shoot, to roam around the rim. This not only baits a player into shooting a shot they aren't good at, but also impacts other pieces of the offense like the pick and roll. Using your big this way can invite easier switches if they can hold their own on the perimeter. Drop coverage can also come into play as well, with the on-ball defender being able to guard more aggressively and go over the screen, knowing that he has a big right behind him. And before we dive into the art of roaming, we need to acknowledge that not every team can run this tactic, and you need the personnel and right situation to make it effective. Modern day roaming only works if A, you have a forward who can handle guarding a center, or B, you run double bigs and one of them can guard the perimeter, as well as C, the offense has a non-shooting perimeter player. When those scenarios happen, this strategy is put into play. This is a big reason why Rudy Gobert has 4 Defensive Player of the Years and 8 All-Defensive teams. He's a prototypical help man that you want at the rim. He's 7'1" with a 7'9" wingspan and covers up a lot of ground on the baseline. I want to look specifically at a few moments in Gobert's career where he was asked to be a roamer. The first one over 4 years ago in the playoffs against the Clippers, a series that ultimately set up Gobert's future a few years later. The Jazz were struggling early in this series defensively, giving up 117.5 points per game through the first 4. Rudy's primary matchup was Zubac, until the Clippers went with a small ball lineup, forcing Quinn Snyder to make a very interesting switch in Game 5. He threw Gobert on Terrence Mann, the 6'5" wing who shot only 1.4 threes per game that season. This was a perfect chance on paper to make this change, putting your elite rim protector on a non-shooter to provide support for a team that was struggling on the perimeter. The goal was to stabilize the penetration from the Clippers when they went 5 out, and ultimately force Mann to take shots he wasn't used to taking. And they found success at times. Watch on these 2 plays after Mann clears the strong side. Paul George wants to drive, but he can't due to Rudy being able to stay on that help side and ignore Mann. Then on these 2 plays, Mann stays put, and Gobert can show to stop the Clippers' angle and force a contested middies. This game plan had moments where it worked to perfection, but eventually, the Jazz couldn't rotate consistently and Terrence Mann went nuclear for 39 points on 15 of 21 from the field and 7 for 10 from 3 to eliminate the Jazz in Game 6. To finish this series, Gobert spent 58.2 possessions on Mann, which was his most guarded matchup over the final 2 games. And although it didn't work out in the Jazz's favor, this matchup, in my opinion, set up the vision for Minnesota's double big system with Gobert and Cat. Gobert being traded to the Timberwolves to pair up with Karl-Anthony Towns in the front court was another step towards the revival of the double bigs. Cat had the reputation of being a not so great defender, so being able to put the Frenchman next to him to clean up any of his mess was a big reason why Minnesota made this deal. Gobert's play from the 2023-24 season, his second year in Minnesota, was arguably his best one yet. He saved 158.4 total rim points through shot contests, which was first in the league. He did so in a new role that he hadn't experienced before, playing on forwards and non-perimeter shooters. I want to look specifically at his matchups against the Nuggets and how the Wolves matched up their front court with Denver's. Gobert matched up with Aaron Gordon for 382 possessions through the entire 23-24 season, his most guarded player in the entire league. So it was clear that this was a tactic they were favoring. Being able to move freely around the court like this to help on arguably the greatest player in the world is a big reason why the Wolves won this series. Watch here, he stays in between Jokic, Gordon, and the rim, and he plays both the drive and the lob to break it up. Same thing here, he plays a Murray drive with Gordon trailing behind him and uses his length to break up another pass. Being able to put your other center, who's a little more physical than Gobert, on Jokic, with Rudy roaming, was nearly impossible to combat during their minutes together. Then lastly, this is why you put Rudy on a non-shooter, to give up these exact shots in high pressure situations. Gobert's partnership next to another center made it a little more acceptable for these next duos to coexist the way they did. Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. Two separate duos that each have a dynamic big who can guard both the rim and the perimeter, which allows the other big to roam around the court. This gives their defenses so much versatility on nearly every type of offensive system, with flexibility like switching or just an overall different look at any point. Chet and Mobley are in basically the same situation as defenders. Skinny but lengthy bigs who are next to true fives that can guard the opposite centers. Watch here, Chet is a low man and used as a tagger on the pick and roll. Brown could easily make this pass out of the roll, but it's an iffy shooter in Gordon, and this gives Chet the chance to help off and block the shot. Then watch Mobley this entire possession, on the opposite side of the court as his man, completely disregarding him to get the block. They both are also exceptional guarding the perimeter on switches. When you have a roamer like these two, it promotes switching a lot more, because you still can have a quality defender on the ball after the switch, and there's no mismatch with the screener since it's an inverted pick and roll, and it'll be a wing on a wing. With Dort able to defend Gordon, this lets Chet, with great help D around him, force Murray into a bad shot. Exact same thing with Mobley. Draymond isn't a threat posting up, but Jerome is still there just in case, and Mobley does a great job moving his feet for the stop. Roamers are extremely useful in the pick and roll, especially with an extra big that can guard it. Hartenstein had a 35.7% defended field goal percentage guarding the roll man this past season. Then pair that with a giant on the backside going baseline to baseline is lethal. With Mobley, he takes up much more ground above the restricted area. Watch how he's in drop guarding the screener, and he still is able to cover the open corner for the steal. And here, he has Reed in the corner. After Minnesota rejects the screen, Mobley is at the rim ready to contest, but is sent to Reed, and he uses his athleticism to pick up the swing, stays in front, and gets the block. These defenses played this way the entire playoffs, and like I said earlier, on a series-to-series basis, you can see some drastic changes to a scheme in favor of roaming. That's what we saw in the 2023 Western Conference Finals between the Lakers and the Nuggets. As bad of a coach Darvin Ham might have been, His decision to take Anthony Davis off of Nikola Jokic and put 6'8" forward Rui Hachimura on him to allow AD to anchor the defense kept that series competitive. Jokic plays away from the rim too much to keep your best rim protector on him, because oftentimes, the last line of defense for LA was someone with a height disadvantage. To start this playoff, Denver tries to get AD switched off of Gordon since he can help off of him, but AD gets through it. After a hard hedge and recover from Schroeder, Davis is in a perfect position to rattle Jokic on the shot, and that's exactly what he does. Here again, Denver tries to move Davis out of position with the green slot cut, but AD stays put to affect the shot. Rui did a great job staying strong out of the post, the place where Jokic is most dangerous from. He knew he had his center right behind him for support, and the help for the helper thereafter. This is a true example of roaming. Watch Davis rotate to the wing, then after his teammate recovered, hustle all the way to the opposite corner to contest a three. To finish the series, the Lakers tried throwing other bodies on Jokic. One thing that stayed constant is AD's role was to hold down the paint off the ball from the greatest player in the world. But the one team who has a consistent history of using their centers this way is the Boston Celtics. It started with Ime Udoka during the 2022 finals run. The Celtics used their all-defensive center Robert Williams in a way that hadn't been seen in a long time. The uber-athletic center averaged over 2 blocks a game and had an opponent field goal differential when he contested at -7.1, which was 4th in the league. One of my favorite seasons from a defensive big man, Williams was one of the best help side defenders in the entire world. He helped the Celtics allow the second least amount of points in the paint per game and third lowest defended field goal percentage on shots less than 6 feet from the rim. As the most athletic center in the league, the ground he was able to cover gave Ime Udoka a real anchor for the best defense in the NBA. Watch here, he's on the elbow and jumps to the cutter to get the block. Then next, he starts all the way on the wing and stops the backdoor cut all by himself. His timing from one side of the baseline to the other was what separated himself from other roamers. The Celtics had the bodies to play undersized on centers like they do here, and this set the foundation for the 2024 championship run, with Jason Tatum primarily guarding centers to allow his bigs to help on the back line. I said earlier, you need one of two things to make roaming work: double bigs or a forward who can guard centers, and Tatum is a perfect player for that. He's bulked up every season he's been in the NBA, which helped turn him into the most versatile defender in the entire league. 3 of his 7 most guarded players in 2024 were bigs, and this gave Boston the flexibility to let Porzingis and Horford close gaps off shooters. Boston could also switch 1 through 5, but that's a story for a different time. Tatum's primary matchup in each series were guys like Evan Mobley, Bam Adebayo, and Kevin Love, Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and left the Celtics bigs to help off of wings like Caleb Martin, Isaac Okoro, Derrick Jones Jr., and PJ Washington. Then that carried over to this year's postseason, specifically the series against the Knicks. Since Josh Hart was a 30% three-point shooter, and Karl Anthony Towns being a stretch big who plays away from the rim, the Celtics were able to stick Tatum on Cat and their centers on Hart. Throughout the entire series, Josh Hart was guarded by Boston centers 48.4% of his time in the game. Luke Kornet in particular benefited from this tremendously. In Game 5, he spent 24 possessions on Hart, which was his biggest matchup. This turned into a near triple-double in just 26 minutes with 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 blocks. All 7 of his blocks came from playing off of Hart and either helping onto other drives or recovering onto the Knick guard. Watch how he manipulates the poor Knick spacing and times his block out perfectly. This was his best possession, showing what roaming can really look like. He stunts at Cat's post-up, forcing him to pick up his dribble, and trusts that his low man, this time being Derek White, has his back. Kornet recovers, and when Hart swings it and clears out, he stays put on the strong side. Hart eventually gets it, and after missing the 3, Kornet's there to help at the rim. Lastly, these 2 possessions he guards a pick and roll effortlessly. He's in drop and able to exaggerate his help. then closes out and stays in front of the ball, eventually getting 2 more blocks. Seeing Kornet able to capitalize off this strategy and set himself up for a nice payday, and great fit to be able to play the same exact role next to Victor Wembanyama, is more proof that this skill set is valued throughout the league. And finally, my last reasoning for why roaming is the best scheme for big men is one of the most elite current day rim protectors in the league, Jaren Jackson Jr., and the GOAT of all roamers, Draymond Green. Two guys with completely opposite body types, but have found individual success with this playstyle. 12 all-defensive teams combined, each with the Defensive Player of the Year award, and over 3,000 steals and blocks between the two of them. Jaren Jackson is one of the few guys that can guard 1 through 5, and with his length, he's become one of the best anchors in the league. He's grown the Memphis system to allow him the freedom of movement that other guys typically don't have as roamers. Like here, instead of just giving up the back door, he's on the ball and abandons Plumlee to save 2 points. Here he's a low man, and his guy, which is a guard, elevates to the top of the key, but he still helps on the block for the rejection. This one's absurd. Once Booker drives, his back is turned, but still gets to the rim on time. From sideline to sideline, there's few better, but he's only one of 2 of the best players of this generation at saving points at the rim, with the next being Draymond Green. Draymond has every element of a perfect roamer. He can cover the rim with his 7'1" wingspan despite only being 6'6", can switch onto guards off of inverted pick and rolls, and is athletic enough to cover ground from any spot on the floor. Besides his elite playmaking next to Steph, this is the main reason why he's had a Hall of Fame career as a 6'6" big man. I expect being next to Jimmy Butler will unlock Draymond again defensively because he finally has someone who can guard stronger post players for certain situations that he hasn't had in a few years. Pound for pound the greatest defender ever, he sees the ball get swung to the corner and immediately books it from the wing to stop the layup. Watch on these 2 plays how he covers both the roller and the man in the dunker spot. First he shows on the screen, stays in front of the roll man, and when Anderson shows at Hartenstein, he somehow gets the Dort in the dunker. Then here he's a tagger and fills the gap, then meets his 6'10" center at the rim. Look at the effort to help off the non-shooter in Harkless. That's an all-out sprint from the wing to get the nasty block. Then off the ball again, tags a roller, and is still able to close out on the weak side for another block. I firmly believe that there's very few better than him in the history of the sport in terms of defensive mobility and versatility, and he set the standard for what big should be in today's NBA. That brings me to who I see as the next wave of guys to excel in this role. Duos like Bam Adebayo next to Khalil Ware, Wemby with Kornet, or even a guy like Zion Williamson when he's healthy. Bigs are becoming so athletic that nearly every one of them may be able to guard out of position. But I do see a future where teams realize they can't keep putting non-shooters on the floor to combat this defense, thus resulting in less roaming across the league. Because having the ability to cheat off of a player consistently in an era where shooting is the norm should not be happening.